Hi, everybody. My name is Tim Glenn, and I just wanted to just make a video diary of my process with the application for the Foreign Service. I just recently took the Foreign Service exam for OMST, which stands for Office Management Specialist Test. What's really funny is I just scheduled, I just looked into it Friday to schedule the test, and I took it Monday. Okay, I think I scheduled it on like April the 27th, and then I was actually taking the exam on May the 1st, which was yesterday, Monday. So while it's fresh on my mind, I wanted to talk about that exam and what it was like, and then also what did I do to study for the exam and how I prepared for it, which basically I was just cramming all weekend, not even really knowing what was going to be on the test or how to best prepare for it. So I just want to talk about that. So first of all, I would encourage anybody to just take it, especially if you have the experience. And first, let me talk about my background. So, what's my experience? I took the office management route because of my background. First, I do have a business degree, and I also have a lot of experience with administration. I am a Navy veteran, and my rating while I was in the Navy focused on maintenance administration for aircraft maintenance administration. So I've been in the office setting in most of my career, with some exceptions. And the administration things that I did were wide ranging from, dealing with policy updates and revisions to policy documents, to information technology, network management, system administrator. I also did laws and records for aircraft, or for support equipment dealing with the maintenance of aircraft. And the list goes on, but it's a wide range of basically administrative things. That coupled with my master's in business administration has given me the skills and experience needed to be successful, I think, in the office management specialist cone. And then my current role, I am a current federal employee for the Navy veteran, but I'm also now a civilian working for the Navy as a civil servant. And in my current role, my job code is 0343, which is management program management analyst. And so, a whole lot of things that I do is very administrative intensive. So, so that's why I chose this particular cone, because I feel like this is where most of my experience lies. And so, that said, I went into this test with the assumption, and I started to regret that I made that assumption before I took the test. But I went into this thinking that, oh, you know what, this should be a breeze because of my experience and my credentials. I think I should just go ahead and just take the test as soon as possible. I don't think that that's the smartest thing to do looking back, but it turns out that I was right. Okay. I think in a lot of situations that would be a faulty assumption. So I'm not encouraging anybody to just take the test like I did. But to study for the test, I ended up cramming all weekend, and I went to, it's a study program called Mometrix, Mometrix, Mometrix. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right. But they have some, a subscription. And what I did was I think that the subscription is like $60 a month. And instead of, doing a reoccurring subscription, I just did 1 month and then immediately canceled the subscription so that they're not automatically charging me for any months afterward. So I just basically got 1 month, pay $60 for it. And let me tell you, it was worth it. Okay, because what I did all weekend, I felt like I didn't have enough time to go through all the study materials, which I wish I could have. But it's okay that I didn't, because I ended up passing the test. But I knew I didn't have enough time to go through all the study material and the videos, which they have a whole lot of information. And the videos and the study guides and the things that they have is for people that are taking the Foreign Service officer test, which is slightly different than the one that I took, which is the office management specialist test, which is very specific to people that are trying to go down that particular cone as office management. They have some other focus areas that, you can study for that too. I didn't know exactly what to anticipate for the OMST. So I studied a whole lot of stuff that I really didn't, it didn't even show up on the test. Surprisingly, there wasn't one single math question on the OMST. Surprisingly, not one single question dealing with math. And I spent a whole lot of time over the weekend just refreshing some of my math skills just to, make sure that I was good to go. And I'm sure that those kind of questions would show up on an economics focused specialist test, or perhaps the overall FSOT. But for the OMST, there was not a single math question, to my extreme surprise. Okay. And then they have a lot of tests in Mometrix that, that does focus on the areas that the OMST, for instance, is going to focus on. So situational judgment, English expression, and job knowledge. Those are like the three main categories where your questions are going to be centered for the OMST. And so they have tests, a whole lot of practice tests, at least 20 of them, where there's like 60 questions. And so the whole weekend, I didn't even take half of those practice tests, but I took a lot of them. And with each of them being roughly 60 questions, somewhere between 40 and 60 questions each. And I felt bad because I started taking the practice tests and I got a lot of answers wrong. But the cool thing about the practice test is after you take it, and it's timed, by the way, the practice test, after you take the test, they'll show you what you got wrong and explain why. And so after going through the test and going through each of the questions that I got wrong, and even the questions that I wasn't sure about, but I just happened to pick the right answer, but I know in my mind, I totally guessed that answer. Well, I studied it when they explained why this is the wrong answer, why this is the right answer. So I just went through all that, and I did that all weekend, okay, with various tests. And each test that I failed, I take the test again and get it 100% on it, or 90 or whatever. And so I did that all weekend because I felt like I didn't have enough time to go through all the study material, which is something I highly suggest, especially if you don't have as much experience as I do with office management related, job roles. And also, English expression. In just a minute, I'll talk about the kinds of things that showed up on the test. But all weekend, that's all I did, and the reason why I don't suggest that you cram and do what I did, it's not best practice, because you can only take the test once a year, even though there's an unlimited amount of times that you're taking it. What's limited is the amount of times that you could take it per year. Okay. You can only take it once. So I can't take the test again until May of 2024. And it's already a lengthy process just putting in the application. Even if you do pass the test, it's a lengthy process, and there's no guarantee that you're going to pass the other, aspects of, the application process. Okay. The test is just one of many hurdles that you got to jump over to get into the Foreign Service. That said, I would suggest that you give yourself about a month or at least a couple of weeks. I just gave myself a couple of days. Okay. But the kinds of things that were on the test were things that I do pretty much on a daily basis. So for instance, English expression. And by the way, all the questions were multiple choice. There was not a single thing that was on that test that was not multiple choice. Okay. I didn't have to do any writing, which I thought I probably was. I didn't have to fill in any blanks. I just had to select the right answer. The right answer is right there in front of you. You just got to pick it because there's also the wrong answer there. So English expression, that was one that, basically they'll give you the option to select the correct way to write a sentence from a series of paragraphs that you read through. You read through those paragraphs, and then they'll ask you about 5 or 6, maybe more questions related to the material that you just read. And then they'll show you, they'll ask you to pick the correct way to write a specific sentence from the reading material that you read. And so, and a lot of times it's just a simple thing like a comma not being in the correct place, or should you use a semicolon here or a colon here, or should you, is it correct the way that it is? A lot of times that's what your options consist of. And sometimes it was a couple of times where, two of the answers were extremely similar, and it was hard for me to see what's the difference between A and D. They look exactly alike. And sometimes the difference is just a misspelling of a word where it needed two P's instead of one. And you would miss it if you weren't really paying attention to detail. So it's grammar related questions for English expression, and just proper placement of your apostrophes and your commas and your semicolons or your colons, and just sometimes they'll ask you what is the best way to word this particular sentence, because some words were in a different order than what would be considered proper English. So that's something I do on a daily basis, actually, in my current role, because I deal with a lot of policy development, updates to policy. And so correcting grammar is something that I do on a daily basis. So that was just a piece of cake for me personally. But I know a lot of other people where, their strong point is math or accounting. And when it comes to English expression and things of that sort, they're just not all that great at it. So it might have been easy for me. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy for the next person. Okay. So you might need some refresher training. And that's why Mometrix is a really good option for that. Okay. Because it got a lot of training materials, study guides, and practice tests centered around English expression. Another section was job knowledge, where it basically just tests your ability to do the job. And so it'll ask questions about the best way to handle situations, such as like if you have, it'll give you a scenario about, what if you got a staff in the embassy that you're managing, and a person, you're thinking about a position just opened up and you're thinking about promoting someone, and they give you an option of candidates to choose from. I got years of experience as a supervisor, both in the Navy and as well as in the private sector. Even before I got this government job, I had some experience doing that in the private sector. And so they'll give you a choice of candidates to select from. And which one would you select? You know what I mean? Would you select the person that's most experienced but occasionally shows up late to work? Would you choose the most junior person who is the sharpest also in the office? Or would you choose the person who has the most experience and generally does a good job? They give you all these different options. I chose the person that's the most experienced and generally does a good job. And that, I believe, was the right answer. They'll give you different scenarios like that. And in an office setting, how would you handle this situation? How would you handle a difficult customer? How would you handle workplace discontentment, where your staff is basically complaining and murmuring about current conditions in the job, and how do you what's the best way to handle that situation? And then right after that, they'll ask you another question: what's the worst way to handle this situation? And so you got to pick the worst way and the best way to answer that same scenario. Okay, there was a lot of questions like that, actually. And then there were a lot of questions that centered around, let me see. So I covered job knowledge, I covered English expression, and then another one was more related to like policy. So you'll read this policy document where it just states, these are the rules, these are the procedures, these are the regulations, this is the protocol for this particular activity. You read through that. One example, it was probably about 7 or 8 paragraphs of material that I had to read through. And all this is timed, by the way. So you gotta speed read, but at the same time, you have to comprehend what you're reading, which is what they're testing. So you might as well just call that session, reading comprehension. Because you're reading a policy document that consists of procedures, regulations, and protocol for dealing with State Department officials or embassy employees, staff, etc. And so after you read all that, it's a whole bunch of questions about it. And the questions are specific about policies that you just read about. And it'll ask you questions related to that policy, such as, is it acceptable to, or is it true that you are able to do this? And, or they'll ask you a question, which select the answer that is false according to the policy documents. And there'll be, 3 correct answers and 1 wrong. And that wrong one is the right answer for that particular question. Okay. So, what's really cool about Mometrix is that I understood going into this test how those kind of questions were structured, because a lot of their practice tests, even though it wasn't exactly those questions, they didn't have a single question in Mometrix practice test that showed up on the real test, but they were very similar and the questions were structured the same way. So exactly like I just described to you, those scenarios and those true and false or best and worst statements, and you answer questions according to that. Those practice tests that I did in Mometrix were structured exactly like that, okay? And so it just made it a very good way to go into that test prepared to answer those questions accordingly, okay? So, don't think that you're going to answer the exact same questions. You might practice something similar or have similar questions, but it's not going to be exactly the same. So you got to use your critical thinking skills, your experience if you have any, and your knowledge of English expression and office management procedures. In some cases, it is very much common sense in some cases. And then in a lot of cases, the correct answer is not all that apparent. So one of my test taking techniques, also Mometrix talks about test taking techniques that'll be useful going into this test, is a process of elimination. That's my go-to thing right there. So sometimes the right answer is not apparent. In that case, pick the wrong answer and eliminate it first, okay? Identify the wrong answer. And a lot of times the wrong answer is more obvious to me than the correct answer. So a lot of times when I go into a question, I immediately don't know the right answer. I identify the wrong answers. And most of the time, if you got 4 options or 4, A, B, C, and D, you could pick any one of those as the correct answer. A lot of times, at least 2 of those answers are apparently wrong. It's obvious that's incorrect. That comma is just way out of place. Or that's way wrong. That's the way wrong course of action to take in this sort of situation. Find those answers that are wrong, eliminate that. And then I'll leave you with about 2 answers. Out of those 2 answers, one of them is right and one of them is almost right. A lot of times those 2 answers that are left are very similar, with one maybe small or distinct difference that makes one of those answers incorrect and one of those answers correct. Okay, so the best course of action in a situation like that is to, go down to those 2 answers that's left, pick the wrong, decide which answer is wrong and eliminate it. Okay. And so I remember one time I was really struggling with one question because after doing the process of elimination, I came to 2 answers that looked almost exactly alike. And it took me reading both of those answers word for word and seeing what was the difference. And it was a really small difference. I think one of the words had it's with an apostrophe. And then the other one had the word it's, I-T-S, it's without the apostrophe. And that was the only difference between the 2 long sentences after reading it word for word. And then so I had to determine, okay, after reading the sentence, the apostrophe should go in that word it's because of what was being said, the context of what was being said. It was a more possessive type thing where it's talking about the Department of State. And so inside of the sentence, it mentioned the Department of State, and it was possessive. So we need that apostrophe in that word it's. So that's the right answer right there. And so sometimes it's really something that simple. Has an apostrophe in the smallest word in that sentence. And that's why you could miss it if you're not paying attention or you don't have good attention to detail. So that's just an example. There's many more like that, but process of elimination. When identify those wrong answers first and eliminate them, and now you're only focusing on two answers. One is the right answer, and one is almost right. Okay, but it's not. So, that's the best advice I could give you. There's some other test taking techniques as well that works, and Mometrix talks all about that. So my suggestion is that you give yourself a couple of weeks to study for it. What I did is not something that I would suggest to my kids that they do to prepare for a test. I would highly encourage them, take your time, study in advance, give yourself, pace yourself. And, cramming is never a good idea. Never a good idea. I'm just telling you that I did do it and I did pass the test. Those practice tests are very, very, very handy. So I suggest that you just go ahead and take the test, schedule it about a month out, and just give yourself some time to study and go over those areas where you're weak. Look at those practice tests. You fail those practice tests, don't feel bad about it, because you could go back, look at those answers, and look at why this is the wrong answer and why this one is the right answer. Look at all that stuff and go take your test, okay? So anyway, when I go through the next part of the process, right now I'm scheduled, well, I'm not scheduled yet. I'm waiting for them to schedule me for the QEP portion of the application process. I'll let you know how that goes. Nothing is guaranteed. I hear that a lot of, whether or not you pass on and you end up getting selected, sometimes it comes down to the needs of the department. Sometimes they need more people. Sometimes they need less people. When they need less people, it's more competitive. When they need more people, it's less competitive. So that's kind of how that works. So even if I don't make it to the next step in the process, sometimes it just comes down to right now they don't need as many people. So it is what it is. But anyway, I'll keep you guys informed of how this is working. I hope this video helps somebody, and stay tuned because I'll be back talking about what's next. Thank you.